All right, so I had a couple of requests for Hattie to teach the lesson today. So um, here we go. We're going to read chapter 8 and because of Winn-Dixie. So Winn-Dixie's bald spot started growing fur, and the fur she had to begin with started looking shiny and healthy, and he didn't limp anymore. And you could tell that he was proud of looking so good, proud of not looking like a stray. I thought what he needed most was a collar and a leash, so I went to Gertrude's Pets, where there were fish and snake and mice and lizards and gerbils and pet supplies. But I found a real handsome red leather collar and a matching leash. Winn-Dixie was not allowed to come inside the store. There was a big sign on the door that said, "No dogs allowed." I think that's a little weird because we always go into the pet store, huh, Hads? See, I always go into my pet store. All right, so I held the collar and the leash up to the window, and Winn-Dixie, who was standing on the other side of the window, pulled his lips and showed me his teeth and sneezed and wagged his tail something ferocious. So I knew he absolutely loved the leash and collar combination. But it was very expensive. I decided to explain my situation to the man behind the counter and said, "I don't get a big enough allowance to afford something this fancy. But I love this collar and leash, and so does my dog. And I was thinking that maybe you could set me up on an installment plan." "Installment plan?" said the man. "Gertrude," somebody screamed in a real irritating voice. I looked around. It was a parrot. He was sitting on top of the fish tank looking right at me. "An installment plan," I said, ignoring the parrot. "You know, where I promise to give you my allowance every week and you give me the leash and the collar now." I, he, sh- the man, "I don't think I can do that," said the man. He shook his head. "No, the owner wouldn't like that." He looked down into the counter. He wouldn't look at me. He had a thick black hair, and it wasn't slicked back, and it was slicked back by like Elvis Presley. He had his name on his tag that said Otis. "Or I could work for you," I said. "I could come in and sweep the floors and dust the shelves and take out the trash. I could do that." I looked around Gertrude's Pets. There was sand and sunflower seed shells and a big dust bunnies all over the floor. I could tell that it needed to be swept. Said Otis. He looked at the counters some more. "Gertrude," the parrot screamed again. "I'm real trustworthy," I said. "I'm new in town, but my daddy's a preacher. He's the preacher at the Open Arms Baptist Church of Naomi. So I'm real honest. The only thing is, Winn-Dixie, my dog, he would have to come inside with me, because if we get separated for too long, he starts to howl something terrible." "Gertrude doesn't like dogs," said Otis. "Is she the owner?" I asked. Yes. No. He finally looked up. He pointed at the fish tank. "That Gertrude." "The parrot. I named her after the owner." "Gertrude's a pretty bird," screamed Gertrude. She might like Winn-Dixie," I said to Otis. "Almost everyone does. Maybe he could come in and meet her. And if the two of them get along, then could I have the job?" "Maybe," Otis mumbled. He looked down at the counter again. So I went and opened the door, and Winn-Dixie came trotting inside the store. "Dog!" screamed Gertrude. "I know it," Otis told her, and then Gertrude got real quiet. She sat on the top of the fish tank and cocked her head from one side to the other, looking at Winn-Dixie. And Winn-Dixie stood and stared back at her. He didn't hardly move. He didn't wag his tail. He didn't smile. He didn't sneeze. He just stared at Gertrude, and she stared at him. And then she spread her wings out real far and flew and landed on top of Winn-Dixie's head. "Dog!" she croaked. Winn-Dixie wagged his tail just a tiny bit, and Otis said, "You can start Monday." "Thank you," I told him. "You won't be sorry." On the way out of Gertrude's Pets, I said to Winn-Dixie, "You are better at making friends than anyone I have ever known. I bet if my mama knew you, she would think you were the best dog ever." Winn-Dixie was smiling up at me, and I was smiling down at him, and so neither of us was looking where we were going, and we almost bumped right into Sweetie Pie Thomas. She was standing there, sucking on the knuckles of her third finger, staring at the window of Gertrude's Pet. She took her finger out of her mouth and looked at me. Her eyes were big and round. "Was that bird sitting on the dog's head?" she asked. She had her hair tied up in a ponytail with a pink ribbon. But it wasn't much of a ponytail. It was mostly a ribbon with a few strands of her hair. Yes, I told her. I see it, she said. She nodded her head and put her knuckles back in her mouth. Then she took it out again real quick. I see that dog in church. He was catching a mouse. I want a dog just like it, but my mama won't let me get a dog. She says I'm real good. If I'm real good, I might be able to buy me a goldfish or one of them gerbils. That's what she says. Can I pet your dog? Sure, I told her. Sweetie Pie stroked Winn-Dixie's head so long and serious that his eyes drooped half closed and drool came out of the side of his mouth. I'm going to be 6 years old in September. I gotta stop sucking on my knuckles once I'm 6, said Sweetie Pie. I'm having a party. Do you want to come to my party? The theme is pink. Sure, I told her. Can this dog come? She asked. You bet, I told her, and all of a sudden I felt happy. I had a dog, I had a job, I had Miss Franny Block for a friend, and I had my first invitation to a party in Naomi. It didn't matter that it came from a 5-year-old, and the party wasn't until September. I didn't feel lonely anymore. All right, so that is chapter 8. As you can see, Hattie's very excited to be teaching today. Oh, she just wants to be rubbed. Say bye. Say see you at 10:30 and 11:30.